Play on the field, the courts, and the ice is just one part of sports. Behind every game are the people hard at work so we can enjoy the action. They're the owners, administrators, agents, broadcasters, and promoters who bring the games to life. Meet them when you go behind the game with Patrick Klinger and Bill Robertson. Welcome to Behind the Game, presented by Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. I'm Patrick Klinger, president of Agile Marketing Partners. Alongside me, a man who is to gin and tonics what Joey Chestnut is to hot dogs, Bill Robertson. Billy?
That's one of your best ones, yeah.
Hey, did you watch the contest?
I did.
Yeah?
I did not the whole thing, but I did watch it.
Yeah, I can't. I just simply can't.
60, what was it, 60?
62 hot dogs, I think.
No, thank you.
Yeah, that's about 61 more than I can eat.
I agree.
Hey, you know, this is a special show. It's sort of a sad show, but yet a celebration. It's sad in the sense that this is your final show as permanent co-host of Behind the Game. You retired last week as the commissioner of the United States Hockey League. You and your beautiful partner are moving to South Carolina in a couple of weeks, creating a whole new adventure for yourself. You're going to be missed, my friend.
Thank you. Thank you. It's very surreal for me to think about it in the terms of semi-retirement and then moving somewhere. I never would have thought 5 years ago that at this time would happen for me, but I'm so excited about the next chapter of my life.
Well, I'm excited for you too. And today's show is all about your favorite topic. You. Now, we're going to talk about your career, which has been really an amazing journey. You grew up on the mean streets of Highland Park, the Highland Park neighborhood of St. Paul. What inspired you to get into a career in sports?
Well, there's a few things. Number one, my parents and my brothers we'd be playing catch in the front yard at 1147 St. Paul Avenue. That was number one. Number two, there was always something, football, basketball, shooting pucks, whatever it was, we were doing it, and we were doing it competitively with my brothers and all that. And then we were about 6 blocks away from the Highland Little League fields, which is called the Ford, near the Ford plant, but the Ford Little League was the main sponsor for so many years. And we would go up there during the daytime and pick up baseball games in the summer. They played from dusk till dawn. You might come home for lunch, go back up, and then that would end, and if you were playing that night, you'd go back and put your uniform on and go back up and play another game. That was always my thought, that I was going to play professional baseball, and I really wanted that. I still dream about it. So that happened. And then I started working and selling souvenirs in 7th grade for the Twins and the Vikings and the Minnesota Kicks at Metropolitan Stadium. I sold programs and yearbooks, and once in a while I would help with one of the boards where they had all the souvenirs on it. And I got to see all these giant players growing up, the Fran Tarkingtons and the Alan Pages and the Harmon Killebrews and Rod Carews. And the visiting teams would come in. I was just awestruck by that. So I knew, to answer your question, I knew at that point I was going to work in sports, whether I was going to play or work for a team or an organization.
Mm-hmm. Well, your brother had a bit of a professional baseball career, correct?
He did. He played 3 sports at St. Thomas Academy, then went on to Boston College and played 3 sports. Then he signed a professional baseball contract with the then Washington Senators, who became the Texas Rangers. And his son ended up playing in the big leagues for a variety of teams, mainly the White Sox and the Philadelphia Phillies were the big teams he was on. So there is professional athletics involved in our family.
Sounds like he sucked up all the athletic ability.
He did. And my father was a coach growing up, and he coached not only in Little League, but he coached at St. Thomas Academy when it was at the college, and then at Alexander Ramsey. And I grew up in an environment where sports was really important, and my sisters may argue that it may have been too important.
Well, walk us through your career, because getting into professional sports is not the easiest thing in the world to do. You know, perhaps a little bit easier than now, but you know, tell us about your journey from Highland Park and selling souvenirs at Metropolitan Stadium, all the way through becoming the commissioner of the United States Hockey League.
Well, as I said, that selling souvenirs, I would go up to the press box and try to talk to the writers and the broadcasters, mainly the visiting one, because I used to collect the Sporting News, which was a publication called the Baseball Bible by some. And I would see the names in there, and I would go up and introduce myself and ask them how they got into this profession. I mean, I met so many great announcers, from Dick Enberg to Kurt Gowdy to Joe Garagiola, Tony Kubek. Those kind of people I was able to meet as a young boy. And I was pretty brash, because I'd go up and just say, my name is Bill Robertson, this is what I want to do. I would invite them over to our home for dinner, knowing that they were leaving. You know, it never dawned on me that they were leaving right after the game and hopping on a plane to go back to their homes or to the next city where they were broadcasting. But that's kind of how I got in. And then when I went to college at Cal State Fullerton, when I was at Cretin, I thought I was, going to play professional baseball. I really had the idea that I was going to be the next Paul Molitor. Joe Mauer wasn't invented yet, so it was at that time it was Paul Molitor. I wanted to be just like him. I wore number 4 for the same reasons. I thought maybe even wearing the same uniform would rub off, but it didn't. But I went off to Cal State Fullerton to live with my brother and his family, my oldest brother, who played 3 sports at Boston College, and tried to walk on and play baseball at a top 5 school, arguably at that time, and I just wasn't good enough to play there. Still think about it every day. A lot of great players came out of there. Mark Kotze and Tim Wallach were 2 that you would know those names, or our audience would maybe know if you're a baseball fan. But I started working in the sports information office at Cal State Fullerton, and then I had an opportunity when I graduated to work the 1984 Summer Olympics in Los Angeles. And I did team handball, was the sport they had me. I've never seen it, never played it, and I thought, hey, if you're going to get in this business, you're going to have to try some things. I wanted to get into the baseball venue or the basketball venue, but everybody wanted that. So they put me actually at Cal State Fullerton in team handball. It actually worked out very well. And we worked 16, 17-hour days for basically a month. And those were the first corporate Olympics. And I got to work the closing ceremonies, and just a neat experience. And I knew right then I was going to do something in sports. And I met a sports writer for the Los Angeles Times who said, why don't you come and string for us and cover sports? So I did that. And I worked for a tennis magazine. I did radio broadcasting. I did sideline reporting. Everything to get some experience in sports. And I was lucky enough to come back to speak at an event in Minnesota for a group that had Tim Lewicki, was just starting up the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I was the MC of the event, and he was very impressed by me and said, I'd love to talk to you. And I went back with that purpose of trying to meet him, because he was really tough to get a hold of. And a few months later, they hired me as the assistant director of communications, and within 3 months, my boss had resigned, and they put me in charge as the head of communications before they played their first ever game against the Los Angeles Lakers. And my hands were peeling, and I was like, didn't know what I was doing, but I had all these instincts of having done all those other sporting things and seeing how people were treated in press boxes. Some weren't great experiences and some were. I tried to take the best of those, and what I liked with game notes and clippings and all sorts of things, and kind of prided myself to make it a fun experience for the writers and broadcasters who came to the games. So I was with the Timberwolves for their first five years. Not very good basketball, but great people there, just great people. From that, I was able to secure a job with the Walt Disney Company, was starting up the Mighty Ducks franchise. The Target Center GM, a gentleman named Dana Warg, was really good friends with the president of Anaheim Sports, and said, we're looking for somebody, who do you know? And he said, this is the best guy you could get. So I went back to Orange County, California, right near Cal State Fullerton, and I interviewed for that, and they offered me the job on the spot. And it was about double the salary that I was making at the Timberwolves, and I couldn't turn it down. And a few years later, they bought the Angels. So I was doing both. I was the first PR director, communications director to do two major sports at one time. And I didn't know if I was coming or going many days. I was traveling a lot and had a young family, and it was just really hard, but it was so much fun and so many neat people to meet in the Hollywood space, because the Walt Disney Company was tied to all that. There was just recently a E60 on the first year of the Mighty Ducks. And I watched it, and there was a cameo of me in the background as Michael Eisner, the CEO, was speaking, and it was just brought back a lot of memories. From there, Bob Nagley and Jack Sperling were touring arenas as they were trying to build the new XL Energy Center in St. Paul, and they came to Anaheim to see both the baseball and the hockey. And they stopped into my office. Tony Tavares says, this gentleman's from St. Paul. And I introduced myself. I had never met either of them. My phone rang 2 weeks later, and Jack Sperling said, I'd like to have you come and consult for a day or two with us and help us get up and running. Mm-hmm. Well, I said, if you get permission from Anaheim Sports, I'd be happy to come back. It was in early December, so it wasn't the ideal time of year to come back to the Twin Cities, leaving 80-degree weather. But I did, and really it was they wanted me to capture me and offer me the job at the St. Paul Grill in the bar area. They said, we want you to come back. And I said,
one of my favorite spots.
It is. It's a great spot. It always reminds me of that experience. And Jack Sperling was smoking a big cigar when you could smoke inside, and I remember that. And he said, would you like a cigar? I said, I was interviewing, so I didn't think that was appropriate, but I kept looking at a cigar going, wow, this is great. And they came back. I said no at first, and then they came back again and said, here's a second offer, what do you think? And I took it, and was with the Minnesota Wild and Minnesota Sports Entertainment for 13 and a half years, through the Bob Nagley era into the Craig Leopold era. Both great owners, different styles, but great people, a lot of memories. And then I tried to reinvent myself, Patrick. I worked for a PR firm called Thunheim, and I built a sports marketing practice for them. And then I went to the WCHA from there as president and commissioner of the WCHA for 7+ years. And then I just finished up this current stint as the president and commissioner of the United States Hockey League. So I've had a whirlwind of activity, and dispersed in there was another 2 Olympic appearances in Salt Lake City with Team USA in hockey for men's and women's, in 2006 in Turin, Italy with men's and women's hockey. So I've lived a full life of sports.
You know, it's a legendary career, and you're beloved in this market. Made a lot of friends. We saw that firsthand 2 weeks ago when we had a little retirement party for you, semi-retirement party for you at Mancini's, and a great turnout.
Well, it was, and you were a big part of that, putting that on, along with Jan Warma, which was great. It was really neat to see all the people that showed up. And again, it was a surreal feeling too, because I was living like in my body, but outside my body, trying to watch it. And I took 1 minute to walk around the bar area just to kind of clear my head and to see all the people gathering around talking to each other. And what I thought was neat is almost every facet of my life was represented there, not only with family, great friends like yourself, but the Vikings were there. The University of Minnesota was represented. The Twins were represented. I think the former Wolves employees were there. Wild employees were there. So it was really neat for me to see all those people, and a lot of writers and broadcasters were there too. And it was such a fun night for me, and one I'll never forget.
Yeah. Well, me as well. Hey, listen, those of us who have worked in professional sports have those pinch me moments, right? When you really can't believe that you're in this setting. I've got a few that have happened in my career. Tell us about a couple that have happened in yours.
There's a lot to consider, but one that's kind of obscure that wasn't not on television is the Angels played in the old Hall of Fame game in August in Cooperstown, New York. And our bullpen catcher for the Angels was a guy named Mick Billmeyer, who's still a bullpen catcher. I believe it's with the Padres right now. And he was the nicest guy you'll ever meet. Just salt of the earth, a baseball lifer. He was a bullpen catcher. He wasn't on the roster. He was a coach. And the game got late, and they said, we're going to play one more inning because we were playing the Expos, and they were going somewhere, and we were traveling all the way across the country to play the Twins in Anaheim. And that day they fired the manager of the Angels after the game. He resigned, Marcel Latchman, so that was going on. But Mick Billmarter got in the game. It was Mariano Rivera, or not Mariano Rivera, Pedro Martinez, was the pitching, and he was very wild, and Mick feebly hit 2 foul balls that he just got a hold of, and the fifth pitch he hit a 3-run homer over the right center field fence. It was a bomb, and he was going around first base. The Angel dugout went nuts, and this is not on television. And he was crying, watching, and I had this exhilaration. I said, this is what I said, leaned next to the PR people that were with me from the Angels, said, this is why you're in this business, to see this. And it was incredible.
That's a great story. Great story. You know, for me, I've had opportunities to play golf with childhood idols like Harmon Killebrew, the late great Harmon Killebrew, Kirby Puckett, Rod Carew. You know, players that I grew up watching and admiring and idolizing, and to have those opportunities to get to know those people and become friends is really pretty special. But one of the moments that really sticks out for me was having an opportunity to have dinner. It was just the 3 of us. It was Bobby Thompson, Ralph Branca, and myself. And, you know, of course, Bobby hit the shot heard around the world.
Yes.
Ralph Branca was the pitcher who threw it. They had hated each other for many, many years. Ralph really disliked Bobby because, you know, it affected Ralph's career. But they became friends later in life, and they were traveling together. And to sit down with those 2 and hear the stories, that's one of those moments you can sit back in your chair and say, is this for real?
Well, I mean, those are cool moments. I saw Michael Jordan in the old Chicago Stadium as I was behind the Timberwolves bench, and Sidney Lowe was an assistant coach. Jimmy Rogers was the head coach, and he yelled out, he can't go to his left. And Jordan got the ball at the top of the key, and he looked over at Sidney Lowe in the bench, and he drove left and went to the baseline, and it was a quick dunk. And it was the most unbelievable thing I've seen. It just couldn't believe it. And he stared back. He didn't say anything. It was that competitive nature. One other quick story. When I was at the Angels, people knew I were from Minnesota, and Paul Molitor hit a game-winning home run in Anaheim Stadium, a 3-run shot in the bottom of the 8th, put the Angels or the top of the 9th, and the whole press box looked at me. I had a suit on. I had to put my hands in my pockets so no one could think I was clapping. Internally, I was clapping. I was really happy for him. He was later in his career, but that was a really cool moment for me. But I could just see everybody looking to see what I was going to do.
Well, you know, Paul's a great friend to both of us. He is as classy as they come. And, you know, I mentioned some of my boyhood idols. Well, Paul Molitor, like he was for you, he is for me. And, you know, to be able to call him a friend today is pretty special. You mentioned the Olympics and your Olympic experience. And you were in turn in 2006 for the Winter Olympics.
Correct.
And you worked with Herb Brooks, I believe, then, was it?
In 2002, I worked with Herb Brooks.
Okay.
In Salt Lake. And what a great motivator. He was a little later in his career, and the one thing I always remember about him is he said, I'm going to be tough on you, but you can handle it because I know you and I know your family. And I didn't know that he knew my dad a bit, but he said, every day I want to meet with the Minnesota media off to the side, and I'm going to tell you I don't want to do it, but you make me do it. And you're here because I wanted you on this staff. So every day I'd go to him after he met with all the international and national media. It's a grind. And I'd say, Herb, are you ready? And he would say no. And then I just would stand there and wait it out for another 5-10 minutes. And then I'd bring him over, and he did exclusive interviews. all the St. Paul, Minneapolis papers and the TV people that were there in Salt Lake. That's the kind of guy he was.
Yeah, I had a chance to meet him once. And of course, he had well-deserved reputation for being a tough guy, a very difficult coach, a very accomplished coach. But I loved him. I thought he was, I wasn't a hockey player, so he didn't have to yell at me, but he was great.
Well, he could tell. It's just like the Tom Kelly who we've had on this show. They can tell people that work hard. They know someone who's a phony and someone who's willing to, work at it. And those are the kind of guys that Herb Brooks and Tom Kelly, for that matter, wanted to be around.
Yeah. Your career, Bill, has spanned probably in excess of 40 years, right? How has the industry changed since you got into it back in the 1980s to where we are today?
Well, I don't know if it's necessarily changed for the good either in some respects. I think that technology piece is the big one for me, and social media. How information is relayed now is so different than when I started. We were on teletype when I first started in college working in the press boxes. And now it's a tweet, it's an Instagram post, it's a Facebook post, it's email, it's all that. There is no main news cycle anymore. It's 24/7 news, and that really has changed the industry, where once the paper was put to bed at 10:30 at night Central Time, you could kind of breathe easy. Well, we got past that, but not anymore, because stuff was tweeted out at midnight, 2 a.m., early in the morning, and players are doing the same thing with their own brands. Sports has become very individualized too. I see more and more, and I don't know if I like that or not. I think players should have the ability to be their own person, but I lived under the old Gene Mauch, Bud Grant, act like you've been here before, act like you know what you're doing, be a professional, and I always wanted that to be the way it was. I don't think it is anymore. It's really changed.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I think technology has absolutely turned over the apple cart in sports. It's so different. When I first got into the game, even not when I first got into it, when I was joined the Twins in 1999, if we wanted to send a memo to fellow our colleagues, literally typed it, printed it, copied it, and slid it into a little mailbox. There wasn't email yet.
Yes.
And look at where we are today with the plethora of social media platforms that you have to be concerned about. How have you changed? How have you evolved personally through your career?
Well, one thing is that I knew right away is when I was in the communications field, people look at you as a communications person. They don't look at you as a marketer or a sponsorship person or someone running the team. So my goal was always to understand the roles of those places and try to fit in with them. I tried to understand sponsorship and tried to leverage all the relationships that I built to bring in sponsors, because that's a revenue generating area. And I think I did a really good job. I was one of the first PR people to figure that out, that you need to be more than just game notes and media guides and press box statistics. It was much broader business. And I think I came to the table knowing that and strived, and I taught everybody behind me. That's how you build yourself and your reputation, and you can get really pigeonholed quickly in sports, as you know, in a certain category. And I think I tried to cut that mold out and tried to do a little of everything, and I was able to do a lot of that. And then in my 2 commissionerships, I had to do all those things. So I had to know. I may not have been an expert in every piece of it, but I knew enough to be dangerous, and I knew enough how to make it work. So I think it helped me.
Your career afforded you the opportunity to meet a lot of people, some interesting characters, I'm sure.
Yes.
The Sid Hartmans of the world, and a lot of athletes, right? Tell us about a couple that really stand out to you.
Oh, there's a lot. I mean, the early years of the Timberwolves, all those players were so humble. The Todd Murphys and the Scott Brooks, who I still chat with once in a while are two of the greatest guys ever. Jim Abbott was a pitcher for the Angels, and before he left, is a miracle one-armed baseball player who was one of the nicest people you'll ever meet. The Paul Molitors of the world, the Ron Gardenhires of the world. Those are the people that stick out to me. And then on the hockey side, having had a few beverages of choice, sitting down with Wayne Gretzky was pretty cool for me. And I still have relationships with a lot of the former Mighty Ducks players and Wild players that I see from time to time, whether at a game or a restaurant, and they always come up and say hi and ask how I'm doing and how my family is. That makes me feel really good. I always like to say if there's one player that was better than the rest, I can't say that there were so many, and I don't mean that as a cliche. There were just so many really cool people, including some of the media people, and including meeting yourself and working. We worked for different teams, but we had the same kind of philosophies on how to treat people and do things right. And I think for me, it was more about teaching the younger people coming up how to do things the right way, and how to be detailed, and how to say please and thank you, and do things that some people don't think are important, but I think they're really important.
Well, you've made a strong impression on a lot of young people, who I know look up to you, and you'll leave a legacy in the sports industry in Minnesota that will be hard to match.
Thank you.
We're coming up on the end of the show. It always goes by way too quickly. Tell me your thoughts about the status of spectator sports today. Do you think, as you reflect back on your career, is sports in a healthy place?
Some of it is, and some of it's not. I think what you're finding is people don't have time like they used to. Hard to commit to 81 baseball games or 10 football games in a year. They might want to go to one or two, and that experience better be really fun for them when they go. I went to the Twins game, courtesy of the Twins, the other night, and had a wonderful experience at the game, eating and saying hi to people and walking around, and I thought, this is what sports is all about when you come to a game. It's that experience, and it is changing, and the customer experience is most important.
Yeah. Billy, what a pleasure it's been. You are going to be missed. It's been a fun 6 years. Come back, co-host the show next summer.
I'd love
to. Be down
to.
in South Carolina, but you come back to Minnesota in the summertime, and you'll be back on Behind the Game. We want to thank Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood, Charlie Swanson and the team out there for sponsoring Behind the Game. And I want to thank my dear, dear friend, Bill Robertson, and wish him the very best on his new endeavors and retirement. He's already wearing black socks and sandals under the desk. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again on Behind the Game.